Hello, welcome to a tutorial today on making a box mold. Box molds, typically are silicone molds. They can also be urethane or, but typically silicone. They can be made out of platinum silicone and tin silicone. Any silicone will work. It just really depends on what you're going to be pulling out of that mold. So I've got some here. This is a very simple box mold here. It is it's a horn, so you'd be pulling urethane or resin horns out of this one. This one is a gang mold, but it's also a box mold. So a box mold is basically anything that you create a box around and then fill it with silicone. So it's a fairly simple procedure. This one's for pulling a form for sculpting onto, because if I'm doing something like a Who nose or something like that, it's got the corrected nose section there to create the air passages. And this one here is a large box mold, and this is for producing duplicates of molds. So what we're doing today is we're going to be taking this mold here, which is made from a material called 1630, and we're going to be producing a box mold of this so that we can duplicate this mold to have 2 or 3 versions of the same mold without having to actually go through the process of claying it all up and putting the keys and everything into it. So it's basically going to be a smaller version of this. So let's get started. Okay, so there are various different types of ways to do this. I've got friends who they'll create this this scenario where they take some wood or some plexi or something like that, and they will create something that looks kind of like this. Okay, and then they'll cut a hole here, and they'll make 4 of these, and then they'll slide this part through here. So what you end up with is something kind of like this. Okay, and because this slot here is larger than that, they'll be able to move this in and out and create whatever size box they want, and it's reusable. And if you want to go to that trouble, you're certainly welcome to. I have done it in the past. It turned out to be a little bit more of a pain than what I usually like to deal with. So what I prefer to do is to just go down to the post office, and I know it's probably not the right intent for them giving out these free boxes, but I use these free cardboard boxes and they seem to work pretty well for me. So that's what I'm going to do today. So I'm going to put this here, and what we need, because we're going to be pouring this up, we need to make sure, sometimes you'll do a mold and it will clay in right around here and then just fill it here, and that will just provide the front of it. We don't need that today because we're going to be pouring this in. 1630 goes in as a liquid and then hardens. It's called a filled urethane. I'll go more into that when I talk about different, I'm going to be doing a tutorial on different materials and when you would use them and that type of thing. But we've already got our, if you look in here, you see we've already got our sprue holes cut in to this particular mold. So what the sprue holes do is they allow for the silicone to bleed through, so we don't get any air bubbles in the fingertips, because when this is actually poured up, it's poured up vertically, which is why it's got a flat bottom on it, and it just stands up like that. And then we just pour it straight into the top, and then there will be a cap, which is why I've got these keys here. There'll be a cap on there, but we haven't made that yet because I'm waiting on the stamp from the client for the branding. So we're going to need to have a wall that goes all the way around, so that when we fill it, we basically are reproducing this exact piece. So it needs to be, a decent amount of wall. So I just normally use the width of my finger. The reason that we want it to be quite thick like that is because when you pour in the urethane, and this doesn't have to be exact, I'm just sort of approximating using my finger. When you fill it up with the urethane, you don't want the silicone wall to be so thin that it bows out. You want it to be thick enough that it's going to hold its shape so that you get an accurate reproduction, because then we have to put the two parts together, and if one of them's warped, they're not going to go together properly. Okay, so we've got it's got our shape here. Oops. And again, this doesn't have to be perfect. We'll be able to clean this up a little bit when we put the actual box together, but this will give us an idea so that it's roughly going to be the same amount all the way around. Next we need to measure the highest point on this to make sure the box is going to be high enough. So this is 2¼ inches high at the highest point. So if we make it 3 or 4 inches high, then that gives us plenty of silicone to be able to cover this whole thing. So let's this is 2 inches wide, this particular ruler, I believe. Let's just double check that. 2 inches wide. So if I use a double width of the ruler, it's going to be perfect. So I'm going to go ahead and just hack this up. And I've got a cutting board down for this part because otherwise it'll chew up the table. And not that this table hasn't had a lot done already, but I'm trying to teach you guys better techniques and better habits. So we will, I don't really want to have this split. This split here kind of sucks. So I'm going to go ahead and just cut that slightly above it. So I'm going to use this line here as my starting guide. Okay, and I'll just discard that. So then I'll measure one width and two widths. Another reason that I like these particular boxes for this process is they've got these adhesive things on them, so that when you're joining them together it becomes very easy. Otherwise you're having to do it with hot glue and it becomes a little more of a headache. Now it's important to use a ruler when you're doing this because you want these to be perfectly flat so that when we're gluing them down onto the base there's no gaps where the silicone can leak out. So we want to make sure that they are perfectly flat, and just kind of get an idea as to... Okay, so two of those is definitely going to be enough to go around the whole box, so we'll be fine. We're going to show you this process for one half of this because the other half is going to be exactly the same, and it's just going to be a waste of time for you guys to watch that. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to get my heat gun set up, and then we will put the box together. Okay, so we're ready to go. My heat gun is set. Anytime I'm molding anything, regardless of what type of mold it is, I always like to do it on a board. It's going to be one like this. I've got some old offcuts of some laminate that works nicely if I'm wanting to mold it straight onto it, which I do often. This obviously is just masonite. It's not really that great for molding straight onto, so I'm going to mold onto this. But the reason I like putting it on a board is because once I'm done, I can lift it up with the board and put it somewhere else to finish curing or setting, and I can keep working on my table. If I just had it put straight on the table, some people will just mold right onto the table, and then that table is now out of commission. Now in my main shop area I have 3 8x4 tables, so table space isn't a problem, but I like working in here because I've got my little TV here. This is my sculpting area, so I like to just sort of sit at this small table, watch TV while I'm sculpting or molding or whatever I'm doing, so it just makes it more convenient for me. So I also always like to mold on a turntable. Now it can be one like this. I've bought some from IKEA for like $8. They're not quite as sturdy as this. They do have a little wobble, but they still work fine. I've made some of my own, which were much larger, and I did that from buying a stool top from Home Depot, and then buying a Lazy Susan for the bottom. I think all up it cost me about $15. So there's many different ways that you can create a turntable. This one I just got from a like a pottery place. So you know, it was a little expensive. I think it was like $20 or something. So, but it's much better because you can kind of just, you know, as you're working, you can kind of turn it, and you know, you're not having to walk around the table or kind of be doing this, and it's just much easier. So we've got our outline here. The reason that I do that, sometimes I'll have this sitting here, and I'll just basically just glue this down around it. But the problem is that it becomes a little bit of a pain having to deal with this big old block in the middle. So by putting the outline, it gives me a rough outline, and then I can just work without having to work around something stuck in the middle. Now if I was to be molding something that was, say I was molding this. Okay, this is a form for sculpting. It's made out of the same material, BJB 1630, and if I was to have this here and I was making a mold of that, because it's hollow underneath, you run the risk of silicone getting underneath and then it floating to the surface and your mold is ruined. If you're wanting to mold something like this that has hollow area, or maybe even if the back was solid, if it's light, it's going to end up floating. So what you would then do is you would hot glue this to the board and then put your wall up so that silicone, if it does leak in, it's still not going to lift your thing. But because this is solid, it's heavy and it's not going to float up through the silicone. So I think we had it this way, didn't we? Yeah, we did. Okay, so if you're having a problem bending it at the right spot, you can take your razor knife and just score just a tiny line up there, and it will bend perfectly where that score goes. I don't really need to do it right this second, so I'm just going to kind of roughly follow this. And I don't want to take it all the way to where the bend is because I want to be able to have a little bit of freedom. And you want to leave that for just a minute. Sometimes what I'll do is, if I'm in a big hurry, I'll have a can of compressed air and I'll shake it really well and turn it upside down, and it'll spray like a frozen gas on there and pretty much set it like that. I would do that now, except I just ran out and I haven't replenished my supply, so we're just going to have to wait for a minute because we don't want that to do what it just did. So, and kind of move. Oops. There we go. And I found that using this type of thing will give you a really nice finish to your mold. You can do this with clay if you want to clay it up and make a clay wall. I find that's a little more expensive than using a free box, and basically all this is costing me is a hot glue stick. So it seems to work pretty well, and it gives you a really nice even outside wall, looks professional, and you know, if you need to do something kind of round, you can kind of bend this in several places if you're wanting to follow that arc perfectly. You want to make sure that you really don't sort of go inside that, inside this line, because we want to have a minimum equal thickness of that wall. If it's a little thicker, that's okay, but the minimum thickness is what we're going for there. So let's just put that in place there. Now the horn mold that I showed you earlier, the little round one, that was basically made by hot gluing the horn that I wanted to mold onto a board, and then I took just a cup, depending on the size of the cup. I think it was just one of those little 12-ounce ones, or it may have even been like a Dixie cup, like a 5-ounce Dixie cup, and I just hot glued it around the base and then just cut the top of it off and put the silicone in the top, and that worked really easily and gave a nice easy wall, so we're not actually having to create the box on that particular one. And we always want to make sure that you're pushing it down so it's always perfectly even around the edge, so that there's no way that it can leak out. Okay. Still wanting to sort of move a little bit if I let go of it, so I'm just going to leave that for a minute. Now while I'm waiting for that to dry, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take a minute and I'm just going to write on here RH for right hand, because this is the right hand mold, and then I'm going to write, this is the palm. And you don't have to do this, but what will happen is that this one here, when you pour the silicone in, it actually transfers right onto the silicone, and you know, sure, it will eventually rub off, but it gives me something so that if I want to get a marker, or if I want to get like a little carver and just carve it in to the outside, you can certainly do that. And then that way it's labeled and you know what it is, because we're going to be doing 2 of these hands, so we're going to have 4 molds that look somewhat the same, so it's going to just be easier if somehow we mark it. What some people will do is they'll do this with clay, and then they'll get some of those little stamp kits, and they'll put the little, and they'll create it. I suppose you could probably do it with this as well. You need to get you need to get one of those ones where you can create your own words, and then you can just, you know, sort of hot glue the letters here, so that when you pour it up in silicone, there'll be a little inset thing with the details on it. That's certainly an option as well. I don't have one of those anymore. It's been many years since I've thought to buy one when I was in at the art supply store, but it is a good idea. So now I'm going to I always like to, it's already got these these folds scored into it, so when possible I always try and just kind of utilize those, just because it's easy. So I'm just going to pull both of these off. You don't necessarily need to put sticky to sticky. I mean, it would work just as well this way, but because I'm going this way, I'm just going to be doing it that way. It will give for a stronger bond, but it's not necessary. We're not going to be doing it up here because okay, so here I can see, looking from this side, I can see where that line is and where I want my fold. And rather than screw around and maybe hit this and knock it over and damage it, I'm just going to take my knife and I'm just going to score it exactly where I want it. And then you've got all these little vertical lines here. You can just kind of do your best just to follow that, and you can see that that immediately folds exactly how we want it. We can bring it in here. Let's cut some of this off. We don't need that much. Okay, so now we've got the enclosed box. I probably could have left a little bit more there. That's not leaving us much by way of adhesive, but we'll make it work. Okay, and then I'm just going to take the hot glue, I'm just going to run it up here, just on the off chance that maybe some silicone seeps through. Same here. Now if I didn't have the adhesive, I would put a bead of hot glue here and then push it right to it. I don't like putting this particular bead here on the inside because it leaves an ugly scar on the outside of the mold. It doesn't really make any difference other than just be an eyesore. So I like to have my molds be as nice looking as possible. So, and make sure that there's no room anywhere around the outside that's missing the hot glue. Okay. And now if we pop that in, and you can see that there's a nice even amount of space all the way around, and that's going to make for a good box. So I'm going to do up the other one because I want to pour the silicone at the same time, and I'll come right back when we're done. As you can see, I have taken the liberty of not only having both the ones that we prepped, but I did the other hand as well because I'm going to pour these up together. Now something that I like to do is if I'm doing sets of molds like this, for example this one here, this is the cap that goes on the top of this mold here, and so when I make it up it creates. This one here is another box mold, so you can see that this is also the lid portion. So by color coding your silicones, it's much faster to be able to pull them off the shelf and get them run and know which ones go with which. So that's a little tip. So we're going to make sure that these two are one color and these two are a different color, just so that when they're on the shelf, because they are all fairly similar looking, so having these two as one color and these two as another will make a big difference. So what we're going to need is a single gram scale, so it can measure up to 1 gram increments. So some of these male scales, I got this one from like Office Depot or one of those places, and it works okay. It only goes up to 2,500 grams, so that's 2.5 kilograms for those of you who are in America. The rest of the world would already have known that, but we do it all in grams because they're more universal and it's easier to measure, and it's just in decimal figures. So this is what we're using. It's Dragon Skin 20. Now the 20 stands for the durometer, or the hardness, and the higher the number, the harder the silicone. So if you were going to be wanting to make a prosthetic piece that's very, very soft and supple, most people would start off with like maybe a 10. So you get your Platsil Gel 10, which is a 10 durometer, which is a much softer, and then they would deaden that even further so that it becomes just like a gel inside the encapsulated material, which is usually like a bald cap plastic, like a Baldies or something like that. So the other reason that people tint their silicone for molds is also so that when people mix the silicone together, they can tell if it's mixed thoroughly, because Dragon Skin is a clear silicone. Now this half has been tinted into like a very pale flesh tone. That's because it's what we're using to actually run these hands and whatnot. So it technically isn't, but for the interest of having them be different from each other to create pairs of molds, I'm going to tint it anyway. So we've got yellow. No, let's use yellow. These pigments are incredibly strong. You don't want to get them on your hands or you'll never get them off. And this one will do. We've got blue, we've got red. Let's do black. So we'll do yellow and black for these. Need some sticks for the pigment. Need some stir sticks. Silicone. And we've got our bucket. Now I don't really want to get silicone on my camera, so I'm just going to leave that right where it is and just sort of work here. You're not going to be able to see the numbers just because I can't get in quite that tight with this camera. So we're going to start off with we'll tear it. So you hit the tear button, it zeroes it out so it doesn't measure the weight of the bucket. Let me put some gloves on real fast. Now Dragon Skin is what's called a platinum cure silicone. So it's safe for the skin. A lot of the tin-based silicones have carcinogens in the silicone oil, and so for medical grade and food grade and for use on the skin, we have platinum cured platinum silicone. The only problem is that if it comes in contact with latex, aloe vera, some styrene that's in some fiberglass and other things, it doesn't cure. So it creates cure inhibition, which leaves a layer of gooey residue on the mold and renders your pieces or your molds worthless. So every time you're working with platinum silicone, you have to be very careful to make sure that you don't have any of those things. So you can't use latex gloves. I'm using vinyl gloves, and you can't use tin-based silicone for the molds. So that's why we're using the dragon skin for the molds. So here I'm about to give a quick coat to these molds. I've got the Ease Release 200. You can also use Free Coat's an excellent brand, and we're just going to give that just a quick. Don't have to use too much. This will pull out of the silicone anyway, but I just like giving it a little help along pulling out. But you don't want to put too much because you don't want to get a build up and lose your detail on the hand. Okay, so we're still on 0. Grab this, and I'm going to go with 1000. Whoops, that was way too much. Just trying to get that last little bit, and so what we do is we can just grab this and just scoop it out. So I don't mind making little mess ups like that on tutorials, just because it shows you how to fix it, and shows that it's not such a huge deal. Now, if the next part that we add, part A, if that gets screwed up, then yeah, there's a problem, because we can't take it out once it's mixed with the other silicone. So I'll be a lot more careful with that batch. This is a clean bucket, so we're not contaminating this silicone with any other part. We're almost done. And we are down to 1004. So I'm going to go ahead and just say that that's fine at 1004. We tear it again. We're going to take it to 1004. Seven, 8, 9, 40. 50, 60, okay, 1010. So I'm just going to go ahead and add 4. There we go. So it's now even. Now we're going to have to mix a couple of batches, because this scale is not strong enough to be able to really handle more than 2,500 grams. So I'll just mix this up. I'm just going to add a little bit of black. And this stuff's very, very pigmented. This should be fairly dark. So you can see how it's not really mixed. You can see that there's swirls of colour. So we want to mix this up until it's all one colour and we don't see any of the swirls. Don't know if you can see that in there. Let's see how it's got those swirls. We want to make sure that they're all mixed in. Now you'll notice also that what we're doing is we're whipping a lot of bubbles. There's a lot of bubbles in there. And we don't really want bubbles in our mold. So what you would normally do is do what's called degassing it. You degas your silicone, and what that does is it sucks all of the air bubbles out of the silicone. But I'm not going to do that tonight because I'm assuming that probably you don't have a degassing chamber, and so it makes it a little more tricky for you guys at home. I don't want to just show you all of this stuff with sexy equipment. So I'm going to do what's called a high pour. You can look in there and see that there's quite a lot of large bubbles. So I'm going to do a high pour, and what that does is you pour it out in a thin stream, and as it goes down, it actually gets rid of most of the bubbles. And I do this a lot for my molds, because it's just, I don't think it's necessary to degas all the time. So you hold this up quite high, and then it just comes down. You can see that that's in quite a thin stream, and you want to make sure that it's in the same area. You don't want to move the silicone all around the place, because if you move it all around the place, you can trap air. Whereas if you make sure it's always in the same spot, then it will flow through and make sure that it's evenly sort of filled up everything as you go. Now the thinner the stream, the fewer bubbles you're going to get. And you see that's just kind of flowing out over the hand. You see all those really large bubbles are gone. There's some very fine ones, yeah, but they don't really affect the mold all that much for something like this. If I was making a prosthetic where you can't have any bubbles, or if I'm pulling a piece and it's one that can't have any bubbles, I would make sure that I degassed it and just got rid of everything, and then also do a high pour just to be on the safe side. But for something like this, it's going to be fine. Now this is going to require another mix of silicone. This was what, 1,000 each, so that's 2,000. I think I'm probably going to need at least another maybe 400 of each, just to bring it up over these high points down here. Because bear in mind that while you're pouring over the actual hand, the hand is taking up a lot of the area that is in the box. But now that we're up over the hand, it's got to fill the entire box. So it's got to not just fill in around what's already in there, but it's got to raise the entire surface of the box up high enough, which takes a lot more silicone than just filling in around something. So just scrape out what's left from the thing. Just found a little section that wasn't quite mixed. So you can see that's a little grayer That's because part of the pigment didn't make it all the way down into the bottom of the bucket. It doesn't really affect the mold at all. So then, now we just repeat the same process to make sure that we've filled it. I'll probably do another 1,000 of each, and then I'll fill this up until it covers this about yay much, and then the rest will go into the other hand. So once I've poured those up, I'll come back because it's pretty much exactly the same thing over and over. So we're all poured up. Everything is, you can see that there's some swirlies in here. That's from the different pigments. I didn't quite match the pigment. It's not going to affect the silicone at all. It's not going to affect the mold. These two are also poured up, and so now we wait. It'll take, I think it's 12 hours for, no sorry, it's 4 hours for dragon skin, it's 12 hours for the mold max. So it'll be 12 hours, so I guess I'll come back and we'll demold them later on. See you guys later. We're back, these are all set, and you can pull them open now. So to open them up, just take them off the board and just tear off the cardboard. Sometimes it likes to stick to the silicone, but okay, so that's leaked a little bit around the under the edge. So I'm just going to take a knife and I'm just going to really carefully just run it around the edge here. Okay. It's just a matter of popping it out, and we're done. Now these little bits here for the sprue holes, we're going to trim those down so they're not quite so long, because we don't need them that long. We just need to know where they're going to go, and then we'll just drill them out with a drill. So I'm just going to trim those down to about, you know, 1/2 inch. not such a fan of this, all this stuff. So what I normally do is I'll just kind of just trim the corners down. Another reason for doing this is that if you look, the surface tension has kind of created a, where it kind of comes up to a lip like this. So I don't want to have any chance that that's going to distort the silicone. So I'm just going to run my scissors just around the edge here, just so it sort of rounds off that edge and removes any part where it goes up around the edge. And I'll do that around the top and on the bottom. Have a finished box mold. Just got to go through and open up all of these, and there we have our box molds. So now we're now ready to be able to pour up some more 1630 into these and duplicate these molds. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.